Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Double Waved Yellows podcast. It is the Mexico City Grand Prix review, and as always, Hodders and Tyson are joining me. Hey guys, how are we doing?
Hey up, doing good.
Buenas noches, Matt.
Buenos noches, indeed, and indeed it was a Buenos Grande Premio for the Red Bulls. That's about as far as my Spanish extends, really. Let's have a look at the race. So the main headlines: Verstappen secures his 9th win of the season at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit in Mexico City. Hamilton holds off the home hero Sergio Perez for second. Meanwhile, the pole sitter, Valtteri Bottas, goes from P1 all the way down to P14. More on that later on. So, straight into our driver focus. As always, we pick 3 drivers to have a look at, and it was all done completely at random before even the start of qualifying, which made it interesting when we were all watching along. So I will go first just to have some sort of decorum to proceedings. So my first driver out was Danny Ricciardo. Qualified 7th, and that's where he started from. Unfortunately, he collided with Bottas into turn 1, losing his front wing. The Australian ended up finishing in 12th place. Hodders, the Australian smile not quite as broad as we're used to seeing it.
Unfortunately not. He had more of a middling weekend, more along the likes that we had earlier in sort of the European stage, and we're still going to use the car. It was a shame, really, considering Ricciardo's recent form. A possible blip towards the end, and hopefully it is just a blip.
Yeah, indeed. So, and Tyson, ironically, Ricciardo and Bottas were battling out throughout the race, but only for 11th and 12th.
Yeah, it was surprising considering the pace we've seen from Ricardo, but he just didn't seem to be on it this weekend.
Nope, not at all. Hodders, on the other hand, I think we were all fairly cross with the first driver that came out of the pot for your pick. Sergio Perez. Hodders, take it away.
Valtteri, I really couldn't believe my luck when random.org threw up a certain, I don't remember, it was number 4 at the time, of Sergio Perez. I really couldn't believe my luck. He had a great weekend. Practice was strong, qualified in 4th place. He got the pit strategy relatively right early on and eventually moved into 3rd place and stayed there. Towards the end, with the younger tyres, he came within reach of overtaking Lewis Hamilton for P2 in the closing stages. Didn't quite get there, however, he did manage to get 2 firsts. He became not only the first Mexican driver to lead a lap at the Mexican GP, that was on the 34th lap, but he also became the first to finish on the podium, and the fans celebrated as if he'd won the whole thing. It was wonderful to see.
It was just the crazy, and they were cheering for him quite loudly the whole race. But when he got into Parc Ferme, it was something we were used to hearing when Senna raced in Brazil. It was just all you could hear was ole ole ole, Checo. Tyson, it was incredible, the scenes, and not just in the race, but throughout the whole race weekend.
Yeah, it was really great to see the Mexican fans. You could tell just how passionate they are about their F1, and you could see that the roar when Perez took the lead and went round for the first lap.
Absolutely, just deafening, which was absolutely superb. Tyson, whilst Perez was no doubt the hero and he got driver of the day, I strongly suspect that someone who would have been towards the bottom of the driver of the day pile would have been your first driver out, Valtteri Bottas. Oof.
Yeah, I got quite an interesting pick here. So, Bottas looked like he was going to be on for a good weekend. He got the surprise pole position on the Saturday when it looked like the Red Bull had all the pace, but then the race started, turn 1, everything just fell apart. Max Verstappen outbraked him, took the lead, and then, as you mentioned earlier, he got tagged by Ricciardo, which spun him round. And then his race, it just turned into a farce. Let's just say, after that race, he could go back to the garage. He could describe the back of that McLaren in complete detail. Then the 11-second pit stop, that just compounded his woes, and then the even more of a farce at the end, the fastest lap, where he had to pit twice just to take it away from Max Verstappen.
I think fast is the right term. I think Bottas just had one of those absolutely awful races. Hodders will go into it in a little bit more detail in a bit, but the race start just looked really, really odd. I mean, we were just watching it back, and it's like, did Bottas move to basically cover Hamilton in turn one, and either did accidentally or otherwise just basically said, "After you, Max"?
Yeah, it was almost as if he moved aside to say, "Come on in." It was very, very bizarre. You would think when you're on pole, the idea is that you would hold pole at all costs and defend what you can. He just didn't seem to have the fight there.
Yeah, I mean, this is tricky. That Mercedes and Red Bull are in a very close battle for the constructors' championship. Mercedes not only need the regular point scoring from Hamilton, but they need Bottas because it looks like more and more Perez is getting the form now. He's regularly scoring highly, if not on the podium. So they need Bottas in play, but a poor weekend from the Finn, and it would be an insult to even remotely call him flying. But let's move away from that. Onto my second driver, and I was given Nicholas Latifi, the Williams driver. So he qualified 17th, moved up to 13th as the result of 4 drivers receiving engine penalties, all being sent to the back of the grid. Unfortunately, much like my other choice, Ricardo, Latifi was caught up in the turn 1 melee, had to pit and repair some damage, and he ultimately ended up finishing in 17th. Hodders just an average race for Latifi. He did the best with what he could, I guess.
I think that's been the theme throughout the whole of the season. There's no disrespect to Williams. Is Latifi and by extension another driver we'll talk about, somebody else we'll talk about later. They've been doing the best with what they've got and sometimes excelling. Again, Latifi's more than capable. It's just we'll have to wait and see what happens next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson, not really much more to add to that, I guess.
No, can't really add anything to that. He just did what he could this weekend.
Absolutely. So, Hodders, moving on to your second choice, and you must have had your head in your hands when your second choice hit the wall in qualifying. It was, and I had to really think about this one for a minute. I nearly dropped the usual.
Mr. L. Stroll Esquire.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Mr. Stroll Esquire, all yours.
Yes, Mr. Lance Stroll. He qualified P20. But he crashed in Q1 though due to engine changes and having the first to do so. He was already back of the grid anyway, so it didn't really affect him in that sense. And obviously, with all the turn 1 melee, he went up a couple of places, eventually parlaying into a 14th place finish, which isn't fantastic, but also not terrible.
No, it's not terrible. And I think it'd be fair to say that, considering starting from the back and obviously had to avoid all the mayhem in turn 1, he did all right. Tyson, we've discussed this on a few occasions this year. Stroll has had a bit of an inconsistent season. He really does need to up his game next season.
Yeah, it's, as I've alluded to before, that just seems to be everything with Stroll, the inconsistency. He can have really good races here and there, but then other times he's just nowhere to be seen.
Especially when he's got a teammate like Vettel with all his experience. And I mean, the Aston Martin team itself, there's lots of money being pumped in. And also that team many moons ago used to be the Jordan team, who were competing for F1 championships and F1 wins. So they know what to do, but hopefully Stroll will move a bit further up the grid next season. Tyson, your second choice, a regular here on Double Wave Yellows, it seems to be, Mr. Saturday, George Russell.
Yep, I got the other half of the Williams duo. So Russell qualified 13th, and you've got to give Williams credit for being able to get him out on time for qualifying, because it looked like he wasn't even going to be able to set a time at one point. He started 16th after taking a 5-place penalty, did well, to avoid all the mayhem on the first lap, but then he just couldn't match the pace of the other cars and just fell down the order, ended up finishing 16th. There was not much more he could have done.
Yeah, and Hodders, this is something we're going to sort of elaborate on a bit later on. It just seems to be that Russell couldn't make much gains in the dirty air once the race got going after an early safety car, and just dropped down the field.
Yeah, it really does seem like the dirty air and the dust really had an effect this weekend. Of course, we'll be talking about that later, but it does make you wonder.
Absolutely. So my third and final driver, and I think I should have read something into this because one of the third drivers to be involved in the turn one melee was Mr. Schumacher. Yeah, I know. I swear someone's against him. Yeah, qualified 18th, however, bumped up 4 places to start 14th. Unfortunately, he didn't get much further than the first corner, being caught in a sandwich. Ocon the filling, Tsunoda and Schumacher coming off the worst, both with broken suspension. Honda's not really much to say. Over and done with in just over 800 meters.
Yeah, and rather a shame considering that I believe Mick Schumacher, that was his joint best qualifying position, albeit this time through upgrades. But nevertheless, he could have had a pretty good race.
Yeah, it could well have done. Tyson Schumacher probably just can't wait for the end of the season now to get the new 2022 car onto the circuit.
Yeah, we know Haas are not developing the car anymore this year, so it's just a learning year for him at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feed and the turn one incident unfortunately feeds quite nicely into Hodder's third choice. One of our favourites here on Double Wave Yellows. Unfortunately, Yuki Tsunoda again probably covered actually less than Schumacher, probably about 900 meters for Tsunoda.
Can the guy get a break at long last? I mean, I think this was the third or fourth race where mechanical failures or bad luck have cost him. I mean, he qualified P9. I mean, he was already going to be towards the back of the grid and eventually 17 due to engine changes, but he did get into Q3 again. So had it not been for the engine change, who knows what could have been. But alas, taken out in the lap one instant, and his race ended very quickly. And it was a real shame as well.
Yeah, it was a shame. And it was one where not really much could be done about it. Tyson, it was interesting to see this in qualifying, that although Tsunoda had this penalty and everyone knew he was going to the back of the grid regardless, AlphaTauri made good use of Tsunoda by using him so that his teammates, Pierre Gasly, could basically slipstream him down the straights and get a much better qualifying. So it was great tactics.
Yeah, it was something we saw all the teams doing in qualifying, and it was a good idea. Just maximise the qualifying pace.
Yeah, and in qualifying trim, they had obviously the DRS down that really long start finish straight, plus the slipstream from their teammates. I mean, you had some teams hitting well over 200 miles an hour by the time they were getting to turn one. Impressive speeds there. So really, really good. And lastly, we come on to Tyson's third choice, Antonio Giovinazzi.
Yeah, and I seem to have quite a bit to say about Giovinazzi because he's obviously fighting for his future in F1 right now. He's the only driver who is not confirmed for 2022. He had a little bit of a moment in qualifying, bumped into the barriers and only finished 14th fastest, but he was probably the biggest benefactor of the chaos on lap one. He was all the way up in P6 at one time, but then Alpha, I hesitate to say that they got the strategy wrong because I think they had the right idea, but they pitted him first for the hards, and then he just got stuck behind the Ricciardo and Bottas fight and couldn't get out of there, which meant he eventually finished 11th for the third race in a row, just tantalizingly out of the points. And what really stings about that is while he was held up behind that battle, Kimi Raikkonen was able to run longer on the tyres and had good pace in the car, finishing in 8th.
To use the common expression, wow, but Giovinazzi fighting so heavily for his F1 career. Hodders, are we likely to see Giovinazzi in the second Alfa Romeo seat next year?
I think the way things are going with all the suggestions and everything else, I'm thinking the chances are possibly limited. I mean, one name that continues to be, and this is not confirmed, of course, one name that continues to be bandied about a great deal is, Tyson probably attest this, is a certain Chinese driver by the name of Guan Yu Zhou. He is currently second in Formula 2, and I did some research before. He could finish almost anywhere in the final 2 rounds of Formula 2, and he would have more than enough points to get into Formula 1. He already has 36 points from the last 2 seasons before even taking into account this championship. He will have super license points, and if the suggestions are true about the substantial amount of sponsorship money he could bring with him, I think Giovinazzi's days may be numbered. But again, we'll have to wait and see. But it's looking less and less likely as days go by.
And that's not to suggest, obviously, Giovinazzi has more than had his opportunities in Alfa 1 with obviously Alfa Romeo and their previous incarnation of Sauber. Right then, so that's the 9. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and Hodders and Tyson don't know this.
Uh-oh.
Now, we've alluded to, we draw drivers at random for who the 3 that we follow for the race weekend. Now, we had planned to do this tomorrow prior to the prior to qualifying. We're going to do it now.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've got the 20 drivers list set in a list on random.org. So this is completely genuine. I wonder if I can actually... Oh, no, I can't do that. Right, so I'm going to shuffle the names up. Now, the 3 I cannot have are Ricciardo, Latifi, and Schumacher. So I am going to hit shuffle. If I can get this to work right. So randomise. Here we go. And Hodders, you're going to have to write this all down. Right then.
Let me get the pen out.
Okay.
Ready?
Right then. So this is the order it's come out in. So Schumacher, can't have him because I've just had him this weekend.
No.
Raikkonen.
What?
Giovinazzi.
You got the Alfa Romeo double.
And Sergio Perez.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
And I will say, just for shiggles, the next one down the list would have been Lewis Hamilton.
Wow.
So there we go.
This is completely unrehearsed.
It's just completely unrehearsed. The guys didn't know I was going to do this.
No.
I've just put it all together literally as we've been talking for the last 20 or so minutes. Right, Hodders. Let's see what this one throws up. Now, obviously, Hodders, you can't have Perez, Stroll, or Tsunoda because you've had them this weekend. You also can't have Raikkonen or Giovinazzi because I've just nabbed them. So let's see what this one throws up.
That's promising.
This doesn't bode well.
Okay, so your first driver out, Nikita Mazepin.
Oh. Oh.
That's a reaction.
Carlos Sainz.
Okay. That's not so bad.
Your next one would have been Raikkonen.
Well,
And then Pierre Gasly.
that'll suit me just fine.
Yeah, and the next
So
one
is
out...
it rough with the smooth?
Yeah, and next one out would have been Russell.
Again, I wouldn't have complained.
No. Right, so let's see how this goes for Tyson.
Who can't have both?
Should I
Or
be
Gio?
worried?
Let's have a look again. Let's shuffle the list. Okay. Now I've lost track of how this has gone, so might
I'll let
need
you know.
Okay, so first one up, Tsunoda.
You can have him.
Okay.
Then Schumacher.
Can have him.
Then Giovinazzi, which you can't have because I've got him.
Nope.
Then
I had him last week.
Then well, we're just sharing him around now. And then Latifi.
Okay.
Okay.
So
It's a good mix.
yeah. So Hamilton and Verstappen, we are not getting at all this weekend. But obviously, yeah. Well, some might say that's a blessing, but anyway, yeah. In fact, actually, on your list, Tyson, Hamilton 15, Verstappen 16, Perez 17.
There you go.
I mean, that would make for a one wacky qualifying session, but I like Perez. Right. Anyway, so that is what we have got for the Brazil Grand Prix. So you know in advance what we've got. We're not going to change it. So help.
This bodes well.
Indeed, I think we might have to start changing the criteria of which drivers we exclude or not. But anyway, on to the winners and spinners. And Hodders, you are going to start because I think for the first time ever we have a unanimous winner.
I'm a bit of a stutter, but yeah, our unanimous winner, and I think this is the first time, is incidentally one of the drivers I've just been drawn, and that is the Frenchman from Valtteri, Pierre Gasly. I mean, qualified fifth, first lap, despite all the fracas, moved into fourth, had a relatively quiet race, and stayed there. I mean, Pierre is really starting to get those very consistent higher up finishes. He was way off the pace for the top three, but even so, AlphaTauri, being a middle of the pack team, it bodes well for the future.
Yeah, definitely bodes well for the future. I mean, to give you an impression as to how far he was off the pace, he was 45 seconds behind Perez at the finish, which is well over half a lap's worth.
Yep.
So quite a substantial gap there. Tyson, it is being touted on social media and the F1 paddock that Gasly perhaps needs to move on from AlphaTauri. It's a tricky one because obviously there's nowhere for him to go for next season other than Alfa Romeo, which would just be a massive step backwards. But where could he potentially go if there's a seat that frees up for 2023?
Yeah, it's a tough one because he seems comfortable in the AlphaTauri, and remembering what happened with his last stint at Red Bull, I'm not sure I'd like to see him go back there again. But yeah, the Gasly being a winner, it was just a no-brainer this weekend. He's had a difficult last few weekends, but he didn't put a foot wrong in Mexico.
No, and with no disrespect to the other drivers, we actually couldn't really think of anyone else who had a really good weekend. And just to clarify, when we do these winners and spinners, it's the winner for us is someone who goes above and beyond what would be the normal expected result or performance. My spinner for me is a team, and I felt actually McLaren had a poor weekend. They were just way off the pace in both qualifying and the race itself. I think they were, where did they finish? I mean, Lando finishing 10th and Ricciardo finishing 12th, both a lap down. And more importantly, they've dropped behind Ferrari in the battle for the Constructors' Championship. Hodders, this was a big development that was going on behind the main battle front, but this is a very big battle.
It is. It is a major battle for that middle pack, and for McLaren to fall behind after their recent very strong performances, it is a little worrying.
But Tyson, again, it's a battle that has ebbed and flowed between the two classic rivals. It's just gone backwards and forwards, and if this one goes down to the wire like we hope the main championship battles do, it's going to be great stuff to watch.
Absolutely, and right now either team could finish third. I'm hoping McLaren find the pace again that they've shown previously, but yeah, this is a really good fight for third.
Absolutely. Now, I've had chosen one spinner. Hodders and Tyson have agreed on their spinner because, quite frankly, this driver had an absolutely appalling weekend. Tyson, let rip.
Yeah, well, I've already given him a kicking once, but Bottas was the spinner for me this weekend. Just a miserable race all round. I mean, small consolation that I took the pole position and then the fastest lap, but the bad pit stop, getting trolled by Max Verstappen when he was trying to get said fastest lap, and yeah, just overshadowed everything good that he did in qualifying. And considering the Constructors' Championship implications, just a dreadful weekend that he'll want to forget.
It was an absolutely appalling weekend, and I think actually it's probably one of Valtteri's worst performances I've ever seen, and that is quite something. I mean, the Constructors' Championship is so precarious, and obviously we'll give more detail on it shortly. Hodders, anything more to say?
Well, I think my view of Bottas's weekend, having thrown it away, can be described in one utterly brilliant word that is completely clean. I could say some things, but we try and be a family audience here, so I should simply say one word beginning with F, and that is feculent.
And there we go. And if you don't know what it means, look in the
description. It's not as bad as it seems.
Absolutely. And yes, family friendly and all that jazz. Anyway, moving on to the talking point, and of course, we always begin talking points with the championship battle, Max versus Lewis, round 18, and now it is starting to become more and more real for the young Dutchman. Max is almost within touching distance of the title. He needs to gain 33 points on Lewis in the next two races. If he does that, he wins the title in Qatar. He's got a 19-point lead with 4 races to go, 109 points left to fight for. Hodders, I suspect that even though Max has been quite calm in the media about it, in close circles, people are probably saying that you're this close. It's starting to become ever more apparent now.
It's a lot of pressure to be under when you're in your early 20s and on the verge of your first world championship in contention with somebody who's going for their 8th. I just hope he's focusing on his well-being in the times to come, because it's going to be a very tough few weeks.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, one thing that we've noted all throughout the season so far is we haven't had a major stewarding penalty affect the result of a race. We haven't had any major mechanical issues as such. It's getting to the point where literally every tiny part of the car, the engine, everything is going to be microscopically checked, because no one at Mercedes or Red Bull wants to cost these drivers a title.
Absolutely, and that makes me think back to 2016 with Lewis Hamilton. He had that one race where he had the engine failure and it cost him everything. This is very much Max's championship to lose right now.
Mm-hmm. And just to explain for those who may not really understand what we're saying about the title being in contention here, basically, because Max has got 9 wins this year and Lewis has only got 3, it means if Lewis and Max were to tie on points, even if Lewis were to win the remaining races, Max would win on countback. So as it stands, what Max needs to do for this weekend, the coming weekend in Brazil, is to extend his lead by at least 7 points. If he can do that, get it up to 26, he has a potential shout at winning the title in Qatar. We'll obviously go over all the potential permutations on our next podcast. Moving on to our next talk about, and this is a bit of a technical one, so please bear with us. We'll try and use layman terms, etc. But we noticed that the dirty air was restricting a lot of overtaking, although Mexico City Circuit is a very fast racetrack, lots of long straight, lots of DRS zones. Tyson, we were noticing that when cars were getting between 1.5 and 2.5 seconds behind a car, they couldn't do much, could they?
Yeah, and it's something we've been seeing a lot in the hybrid era. The DRS does mitigate that somewhat, but once you really close up behind a car, it just feels like unless you've got a really good launch on them, there's just no way past.
Absolutely. And just to kind of explain what we mean by dirty air, basically it's all the air coming off the car in front that is just really disrupted with all the aerodynamic devices, and it just really, and then all that disrupted air is then going into the car behind, and obviously playing havoc with the aerodynamics. Hodders, hopefully with next year's car, the 2022 car, we're going to see a lot less of this dirty air and hopefully a lot more overtaking.
I hope so. I mean, the more overtake, I think when it comes to racing, of course, the more overtakes, the merrier. The dirty air wasn't ideal, and I think the altitude may have also been a factor as well in Mexico City, but hopefully it wasn't, and we do hope that this is resolved in the new regulations.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We failed to actually touch on it earlier, in the fact that the Mexico Grand Prix, it's at altitude, so yeah, that was possibly having an effect
Thinner
on
air.
thinner air, so therefore less overtaking or less work that the engine could do, which also potentially means actually feeding back into the championship battle. Those engines would have been pushed very, very hard. We may see some more engine penalties coming up, but we will wait and see. So next talking point, and we kind of alluded to it earlier on, Perez could have finished second in his home race. Red Bull 1-2 would have just absolutely blown the roof off of that baseball stadium at the circuit. Perez pitting too late for his first stop. Hodders, it's rare to see a Red Bull team make this sort of tactical mistake here.
It is. I mean, in many of the previous podcasts, we've been praising Red Bull for their strategies. It was a mistake. It did cost points, in particularly for the constructors' side and Checo himself more than anything else. I mean, hopefully it is a one-off, considering that when the pit stops actually happened, they were spot on.
Yeah, Tyson, that's a fair point. The actual tyre strategies that that Red Bull employed were absolutely spot on, especially with Max. It's just unfortunately they didn't seem to account properly for Perez and in terms of the undercut.
Yeah, I think in this case, Red Bull tried to play it a little bit safe because we have seen this before where they go on one strategy and Mercedes will throw something wild out there just to try and throw them off. I think leaving Perez out the way they did limited Mercedes' options. They very much had to play Red Bull's game at that point.
Yeah, indeed, and that is a legit point. So, lastly, we will have a look at the championship standings as they stand with 4 races to go. So, Max is on 312.5 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton on 293.5 points, so a gap of 19 points. Bottas is on 185 points. Sergio Perez closing the gap now on 165, just 20 points behind. Lando on 150. Leclerc easing away from his teammate, 138 points ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz on 130.5. Danny Ricciardo on 105. Pierre Gasly on 86, cementing his place in the top 10. And then Fernando Alonso on 60. In the Constructors' Championship, this is tight. Mercedes, 478.5 points. Red Bull Honda, 477.5 points. Just 1 point in it with 4 races to go. Ferrari with a 17-point benefit over McLaren. Ferrari now on 268.5 points. McLaren Mercedes on 255. Another close battle to watch there. Alpine and AlphaTauri tied on 106 points. The great performance from Pierre Gasly may have given AlphaTauri a chance of nicking 5th place in the championship. So lots of battles to watch there. Aston Martin on 68, Williams on 23, Alfa Romeo on 11, 4 more points for them, courtesy of Kimi Räikkönen, and Haas bringing up the back on 0. So we're going to move not quite into our final thoughts, but looking ahead to this weekend, the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. Tyson, this is always a spectacular race to watch.
Yeah, it's always one of the races on the calendar I'm always looking forward to. And this weekend, we've got a sprint as well.
We have indeed. We have the sprint event. So qualifying, for those who don't know, qualifying is held on the Friday evening, which determines the starting grid for a 100-kilometre event on the Saturday afternoon, which is held in instead of the usual qualifying. The result of that sprint sets the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. This will be a really fascinating weekend, I'm sure, Hodders, because Hamilton won 2016, Verstappen won 2019. Hamilton won in 2018, but equally, Verstappen should have won this in 2018 had it not been for an absolutely ridiculous move by Ocon, trying to unlap himself and knocking Verstappen out of the lead. It's going to be a really good element to the championship battle.
It really is, and what a place to do it. The likes of Brazil, where championships have been won and lost before.
Yeah, and the home of Hamilton's hero Ayrton Senna. Yep, I'm looking forward to the Brazil Grand Prix. Don't forget to check your local listings for when it's on. UK, I believe it's lights out at 5 p.m. So, coming soon, we will, of course, review the Brazil Grand Prix, and that will be available on our YouTube channel from Friday morning. The weekend after that, we are going to review the first of the Qatari Grand Prix. We could potentially be talking about the crowning of either a new world champion or an 8-time world champion. We will wait and see. As always, Hodders, Tyson, thank you very much for your company and for your contributions. 4 races to go. Hodders, we're in for a right nail biter here.
And that's putting it mildly.
I think I'm down to my elbows now, but there we go. Tyson, anything you reckon we should be looking out for Brazil? It's such a iconic and classic track.
Well, if we get a little bit of rain, that will certainly make things interesting as we've seen in the past.
Oh, Brazil plus rain is always something spectacular. And of course, the Interlagos means literally between the lakes. Guys, thanks as always for your help. And also, of course, my thanks to you for watching, for listening. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter, DWavedYellows. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a comment on this video. Be good, and if you can't be good, be safe. From all of us here, goodbye.